Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. The government is stepping up efforts around cybersecurity to check the rising menace of financial frauds and terror threats. There have also been hacking incidents in the country by the so-called hacker group Legion. In view of this, Ravi Shankar Prasad, Minister of Law and IT, said that cybersecurity is one of the priority areas of the Modi government, especially at a time when India is on an overdrive in promoting cashless transactions and has been rolling out numerous citizen-empowered services digitally. The government's focus on cybersecurity comes at a time when India is playing host to the global conference on cyberspace that will be inaugurated by Prime Minister Narendra Modi on Thursday. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will analyze the need for better cybersecurity in India. Joining me on the program today are Arvind Gupta, Head BJP IT Cell, Karnika Seth, Cyber Law Expert, Srinivas, Kodali, Independent Cyber Security Researcher, and TK Arun, Editor, Opinion, The Economic Times. Thank you to all my guests for joining me on this edition of The Big Picture. I'd like to start with the lady on the program. Karnika, how seriously do we take cyber security in this country?
Well, it's of paramount concern now because, as you said, that most of the transactions are going like cashless. It's all going e-wallets, and there's smart money involved. And security becomes a big challenge, especially now that the privacy has now been held as a fundamental right, of every citizen. It's a fundamental right now, and with that Supreme Court's verdict, alongside the current, spate of cyber crimes that are rising, and the Aadhaar issue interlinked with this, definitely cybersecurity becomes one of the most pivotal, I would say, aspects of cyber law and the evolution of cyber law today.
Sure. Srinivas, as far as securing the space itself is concerned, what needs to be done, do you think, at this point in time?
I think there's a lot which needs to be done right now because we need new tools. Capacity building must be done in the various departments. We do not even have a bug bounty tool where I can report some cyber security issues to the government. Well, there is no mechanism in place to address some of these challenges. I mean, there's a lot which needs to be done.
Sure, you're saying there's a lot that needs to be done. TK Arun, till 2013, we did not even have a cyber security policy in place. Has anything changed since then?
I'm sure some things have changed, but has it changed enough to make this country secure from a cyber attack point of view? I don't think so. See, we are moving into a situation where everything is connected, interconnected. If you control, say for example, if the Mumbai suburban railway signaling system is controlled by a set of computers, if somebody can take control of that, you can imagine the havoc that can be created. All your accounts for shareholding, the demat accounts, they are there up there in cyberspace. Yeah. If somebody hacks them, the entire ownership structure of Indian assets, wealth can be turned topsy-turvy. Dams, sluice gates can be opened if somebody can take command of these SCADA control systems. So, in the modern world, cyber warfare is something very, very, very material and threatening.
When you're talking of this, the movie Die Hard 4 comes to mind.
Exactly.
Is that a possibility in reality? You say?
Of course, absolutely, absolutely. And we need technology, we need processes, we need procedure, and we need laws and enforcement agencies which are in turn accountable to some popular representative part of the government. I don't think we have progressed much in any of these areas. Today, a large part of your telecom network is procured from companies about whose equipment and their integrity from a cyber security point of view, you have no guarantee, you have no certainty. We don't have the technological capability to assess the kind of equipment we buy and deploy in our telecom networks. Many countries have made considerable progress in quantum communications, including China, especially China. We are nowhere. We don't have one single large-scale manufacturer of telecom equipment. The basic routers and switching equipment, that is the part of a telecom network. We are talking about 4G, 5G. We will deploy equipment supplied by foreign companies about the nature of whose equipment and what it contains. We actually have no clue. we think we can buy technology from Israel, from US, from somebody else. It's not enough. It's time we started spending serious money into indigenous R&D, into telecom and associated computer related technologies to be able to at least secure ourselves. Secondly, we need laws, but making laws is the simplest thing. But to enforce laws, you need protocols, very efficient ways of enforcing these protocols. The weakest link is absolutely the weakest link. One individual who can be tricked or suborned into parting with vital information, he can expose a large part of the system.
Sure.
So we have to do all this.
Yeah,
There's no going.
okay. Lots needs to be done is what you're suggesting. We'll get into what can be done first, but before that, let me go across to Arvind Gupta, head to the BJP IT cell. You know, several concerns have been raised by the previous panelists. How do you propose that the government addresses some of these problems, and how serious is the government as far as cyber security is concerned?
So, Frank, let me address your question in multiple parts. Number one, I think the government of the day is very, very serious about the digital economy that India is building. And given that the trust and resilience of the cyber systems is key for the digital economy to succeed, I think from the top-down leadership, I think everybody is very cognizant of the importance of cybersecurity. I do want to differentiate between cybersecurity and privacy, and I will comment on that. There is an overlap, but they are two different issues. It is to be noted that this is the first time in India that the global conference on cybersecurity is being hosted. This conference is a global conference, first time being hosted outside OECD countries. So there's a lot being done at a multilateral level, at a bilateral level, at an internet governance level. But I think fundamentally the scale that India has been digitized at needs a multi-pronged approach, a layered approach to cybersecurity. While enterprise-level cybersecurity, network security, TK Arun was talking about, telecom security is very important. I think we need to make sure that from our mobile phones to our users who should understand cybersecurity, and for which the government has launched a massive cyber literacy program for covering about 60 million households. So there is absolute cognizance of the same, and two, that it needs to be taken from the consumer to the phone to the networks to the enterprise systems, and everything needs to be secure. Something was being said about capacity in India. I mean, no country can rest at whether it has been attacked or not. We need to constantly build capacity, upgrade ourselves with the latest tools. Having said that, I think the biggest thing with India has been that there has been a lot of diplomatic victories that we've done globally. The world trusts India as a neutral player. But more importantly, I think India has the IT prowess, the IT manpower, and a lot of non-institutional players in the cyber world, which have really held fort for India also. So we must recognize their efforts. There is the cyber world is both state and non-state, and many individuals who do a lot of work in the cyber world, and they've done a great job in defending India's cyber frontier. So I think, having said that, we live in a dangerous neighborhood, a very dangerous cyber neighborhood, and we need to be constantly on our vigil. But let me assure you that there is enough cognizance from the top down, from the Prime Minister to every single person. We have a National Cybersecurity Coordinator.
Right.
And we are, in fact, in this year's budget, there was a special emphasis, a new CERT being created for financial transactions. So everything is being done, and more needs to be done. This is a constantly evolving battlefield.
I'm glad that you accept. I'm glad that you accept that more needs to be done. Of course, a lot of steps have been taken. More needs to be done is what you're talking about. We'll get to that in just a bit. But before that, I want to talk about the law aspect when it comes to cyber crimes. As far as laws are concerned, do you think that we have adequate laws to deal with the problem? Because cyber crime is constantly evolving. It's constantly changing. So what needs to be done?
There is definitely a need to amend the law. Current law as it is in India, the IT Act in itself is not so sufficient. To my understanding, and I've seen that a lot of cases are, are being filed every day. The conviction rates in those cases are far too low. And if you see the POCSO Act, especially the children, the crime against children online, the way that's growing, and there have been hardly 2.5% conviction rates. The reporting is even in general, I mean, if you talk about cybercrime in general, there have been just 11,000 or so, complete registrations in the whole of last year as per the NCRB data. So the reporting is also low. The enforcement needs to be stronger, and even law as it is, it needs to be stricter. The 3-year term that usually has been given, and most of the sections of the IT Act make them bailable, which is not deterrent enough to, deter the criminals. And in number of offences which are not even there, like after the Shreya Singhal case, when Section 66A was struck down, we don't have a clear provision against cyber stalking, for instance. And there have been spamming. Against spamming, there is no provision in the IT Act as on date. There are new offences like phishing, sexting, and sextortion, and there are a lot of other offences which are still not covered. So we have to have better laws and amend the existing laws. For instance, grooming, in the IT Act, 67B of the IT Act, doesn't speak in the terms that like you would have in UK or Scotland, where even contact offences, somebody contacts a child and thereafter meets the child offline. Now those offences are also covered by those laws in Scotland and UK, whereas we don't have that kind of a provision here, even despite the fact that POCSO is there, even despite the fact that IT Act is there. So a number of provisions, we need to amend the law as it stands today. And the kind of ransomware attacks we are having today, and the kind of cyber war and terrorism, thankfully we do have 66F in the Act, which says deals with cyber terrorism. However, there are other aspects of security, for instance, which need to be tackled. Hacking is only 3-year term of punishment, which is again bailable.
Sure.
So this is something that we really need to seriously work on now. I'm very happy with the GCCS summit now being held in say this country today, and I was glad to be on the panel of one of the precursor events as well. And there I've seen that a lot is being done. International participation is there, which is very good. Cyber awareness is spreading, and that was the need of the hour. It has to involve a multi-stakeholder approach, technological inputs, legal inputs, at the same time strengthening the law enforcement systems, and then trans-border crime. Dealing with trans-border crime involves a lot of international cooperation. I would strongly urge the government that one should consider having signed a cybercrime convention, because as on date, India is not a signatory to a cybercrime convention, which puts a hurdle in dealing with trans-border crime particularly. So that's something that, since you're having the GCCS 2017 conclave, I think it is a right time to discuss this opportunity and take this India further ahead.
Sure, I'm sure Arun Gupta will respond to that when it comes to his turn to respond. But before that, let me bring in Srinivas. As far as the laws are concerned, we can amend the laws, we can change the laws, but by the time we amend and change a law, it's going to take some time. So in the meantime, the crime has already evolved. So the law is continuously going to play catch up. So what do we do to try and deal with that problem?
True. I mean, technology is always much advanced when the law is. Then the law has to keep up the pace. But as Mr. Gupta has been saying, that the government does recognize various actors in this place with whom the government can work and fasten this process. But I must complain that when we are praising the government, the actual reality is much different. When you look at how a cybercrime is processed at a cybercrime police station, the cop who is there does not have the capacity to understand most of these crimes. He is there on a 2-year stint, and then he gets transferred to some other department within the police, maybe traffic or something else. But there is no one full-time cybersecurity expert at most of these cybercrime stations. And I must also complain that when you are saying that you're recognizing these actors, you should just look at the number of civil society participants at GCCS, and it's not many. I'm not there. the government says it recognizes it, but the words and its actions are completely different.
So involvement of all the stakeholders is something that you're looking at this point in time. Okay, TK Arun, that's a very valid point that he raised. I mean, at the lowest level, can we deal with an issue like a cyber crime? Because changing the law here and there, or just changing your software is not going to help. We need a systemic overhaul really to deal with the problem, don't you think?
Absolutely, capacity building is essential. But as Arvind Gupta said, the government is trying to develop capacity. See, we must not conflate two things. One is the threat to national security emanating from the cyberspace. The other is individual security, financial, all kinds of privacy related, being threatened by cyber criminals. So cyber criminality at one level, and the threat to national security and the ability to undermine your very existence of the nation, which this thing poses. Now, as Srinivas said, we need international cooperation on very many things. If a server from which your attacks are directed at a particular target in India is located in some jurisdiction with which we have no direct interaction or cooperation protocols, how is that to be tackled? How are we in a position to monitor cyber traffic or chatter without violating privacy? Privacy is also part of this. And in the name of protecting the country's cyber integrity, should we create a situation where individual privacy is totally compromised? What are the conditions under which?
But shouldn't national security trump everything else?
That can be an excuse for violating privacy and individual liberties. So in the US and the UK, if you need to curtail somebody's right to privacy on valid grounds of national security or prevention of crime or prosecution of crime, you obtain a court order to do that. And such instances are collated. And finally, a committee of parliament, in the case of the US of Congress, hears an account of what actually transpired and whether those court orders were actually justified or not. In India, the spooks can get away with anything. You can spy on, snoop on anybody, and there is no accountability. So this basically strikes at the root of our individual liberty and democracy.
Sure.
So while we need cybersecurity, we also need to balance individuals' rights, liberties, and privacy.
Arun Gupta, I know your name was raised by all the panelists, and you were addressed by all the panelists as well. I'm going to give you some time now to respond to everything that they have said. But first, let's take up the privacy issue.
On the privacy matters, I think there has to be a fine balance. Privacy has to be respected. The Supreme Court has ruled to it, and there is no doubt it has to be respected. The only exceptions that we have already discussed is national security and other public benefit and public order. And in the privacy matter, I think what data do you analyze without personally identifiable information, and what you don't at a metadata level will dictate, and where you drill down more, where there is an imminent threat coming, will decide where you can go more. But having said this, I think privacy should not become a shield for anti-national activity. So there has to be a balance and right use of technology in analyzing metadata emanating from, let's say, a hotspot, which is trying to search for how do you make a bomb, and everybody every day is doing that searches and going to particular suspected sites to learn that. Now, in those cases, you may need to drill down, but otherwise, if I'm doing a normal search on how people once in a while or whatever, it's a normal content searches, you don't need to drill down more on that. So there has to be a balance between privacy, metadata, and personally identifiable information. The US is not the right model. When people talk about the US, I get very scared. And I'm sure Srinivas and others who are technical experts will agree with me that US is not the right model. India has had a very good, this change of pace in India has been very fast. And I do agree that the cyber capacity of our enforcement has not kept pace with that. Today, probably, 90% of the times people don't recognize that they have been cyber compromised or they have a malware in their computer. So, the Nigeria 419 scams, which is basically an awareness issue, are the highest in India, are one of the highest in India. So what we are facing is a situation where people don't even report. And I know Karnika mentioned that people don't even report crimes. So the capacity of enforcement has to be increased. The awareness level of people has to be increased.
Sure.
And probably, I don't know what the exact numbers of cyber crime division police stations that we have. Probably is 1:200 today. It needs to be at 30 is 200, 40 is 200. The capacity really needs to increase. So the problems that Srinivas is saying, that people are posted for a while in the cybercrime division and then they move on, is true. And we need to change that, because we need to get more people trained in cyber enforcement, cyber, understanding of cyber issues.
Sure, okay.
A couple of things were mentioned on international treaties and agreements. I think a lot of work is being done on that. Anybody who's studying that knows that the world respects India, and there is a lot of agreement with India that is happening today. Data sharing has started happening. We need to see a lot more of that.
Okay.
And there are multiple technical issues involved. I mean, today, people don't value the secrecy and privacy of their own data.
Sure.
We see that all the time. There is a case that bundled products into our cell phones are sending data away to servers in other countries. And
I'm sorry to cut you short, but I'm going to take the point that you're making forward. I'm going to take the point that you're making forward, because I've got 4 minutes left on the program. Quick closing comments from all my guests, starting with you, Karnika. Do we, as a people, do we take cybersecurity seriously? Do we need to spread awareness? What needs to be done? With the number of crimes that are happening in the country today, half of them are not even reported.
Yes, that's true. We need more awareness, and it has to be at every level, industry level, at school level, at college level, and then I would say law enforcement level, and even judiciary. So we need better lawyers who are trained in cyber lawyers. There'll be more awareness required in every aspect, and the trust which needs to be built in the legal system, again, that we can handle these problems and there will be a resolution, there will be a solution, is something that we really need to instill in the whole public in general.
Okay, sure. Srinivas, is there a model that we can use here in India? Because crime is not just limited to India, it happens all around the world. Is there something that we can replicate here?
So one thing which I'd like to stress is you need to listen to people, especially researchers who are qualified, who are suggesting better things to the government. So what happens right now is I have been suggesting the government for the past 2-3 years at multiple levels, from local to the central level, on various cybersecurity issues, but they never get followed up and they never listen. I mean, I don't understand how to make them understand when it's clearly an issue. Now we are debating about it, but if you look at it, there have been so many instances and there has been no investigation whatsoever of any investigation of any incident which happened in the past. So, I mean, only thing I have to say is make it safer for researchers to report some of these issues and act on them.
Sure. TK, Arun, going forward, what is the problem area that we need to address first?
Awareness, capacity, certain laws to mandate that any cyber attack which happens anywhere should be mandatorily reported. Fixing of responsibility of nodal agencies who will keep track of such cyber crimes and take follow-up action, and then holding these bodies accountable to appropriate bodies of the government.
Sure. And Arvind Gupta, close the show for us with your concluding remarks.
So I think we need to really invest and accelerate the cyber literacy programs throughout India. The youth dividend of India needs to take charge in that. And of course, parallelly build capacity both nationally and internationally. Create disaster recovery centers outside India, monitoring command centers outside India. Three, I think a lot of international agreements need to be, more international agreements need to be put in place. More software coming from India, more technology coming from India, not only should be mainstreamed within India, but should be taken global.
Right.
But lastly, very importantly, TK Arun mentioned that we need to secure our supply chain, which includes a simple mobile phone. Today, we basically, the operating system to the applications everything on the mobile phone is 7 out of the 10 top applications in India are from outside India. So
Sure.
we need to really take control of our supply chain and I think for that a lot of Indian innovation needs to go into that. So
All right.
there is a lot in the area of cybersecurity, and there is only there is so much that the private sector, the innovators of India have to do in that, and I think that's a very, very sunrise sector for India.
All right. On that note, then we'll call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. I'd like to thank all my guests for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have today. See you again next time.